Welcome everybody. Welcome to my stream, to my part of the Modular Day or the GSG Live Modular Edition. I hope that the microphone level is alright. I'm using a headset today and I just need to get the cable sorted. So I mean, most of you have seen my stream before from a different view, basically showing all of the setup, but today, like the topic says, we are going to focus on modules. I mean, my setup basically consists of two parts, and that's mostly the modular side that you see now, but there's also the player side, I would say, because those are synthesizers and other keyboards with keys, obviously, and I'll just go quickly through them because they're not in our focus today. It's at the top, the view that you know from my stream, the Behringer Poly D. Very common sound. Thanks for the follow, Device X62. The ARP Odyssey. Very nice bass sound. My actual first synthesizer is next, the Moog Little Fatty from 2010. Next up, my main keyboard, actually, the Nord Electro 5D. Delivering all the mellotron and organ sounds, E-piano, grand piano, all that you can imagine. Next up, the string synthesizer, the Behringer VC340, I think. With additional phasers, so that there's the 70s sound, and then at the bottom, the one that you basically never see, the DeepMind 12. Adding the polyphonic sounds, but the main action takes place on this corner. I think that you can see my first rack that I bought from a friend, I think 2 years ago, my actual start of the modular journey. It's a simple Döpfer wooden rack case, the low-cost case as they call it, and it started off with a bunch of different modules that my friend from whom I bought this had in his previous setup. He wanted to get rid of these because he said he wanted to reduce his modular setup, something that only very few people actually achieve, because like Nick Bett said in his Moog Mavis review, that once you start with modules, it's the rabbit hole and you fall inside, you fall deeper and deeper until you sell your house, you sell all your belongings except the modules themselves. And it was basically a similar path that I had, because I started with this simple rack. It was half full, I would say, and then started developing what kind of sounds I wanted to achieve by synth modules. And actually the very difficult part for me, at least, is to find a way to get an overview of all the modules that are available on the market at the moment, on the first-hand market, of course, and especially on the second-hand market or eBay or some kind of stuff, or even personal manufacturers who create very small series. And the difficult part is to know what you need to get the sound that you want to have. I mean, I'm lucky that Dieter Döpfer is in Germany as well, so that basically buying modules from Döpfer is a very easy and simple way to go, because they're cheap, the quality is very good, and he has a wide range of modules. And also, I think he has the advantage of actually having developed and established the Eurorack format back in 1996 or so. And as I said, the quality of his modules is great, so basically all that you want to, or all that you need to start with is available from Döpfer and also explained very well. That's how I started, with a simple setup of one oscillator, a filter unit, and of course a VCA, the amplifier that you need. Those are the three elements, the three basic modules you need to create sounds in a modular system. I still use the initial oscillator voice in a experimental setup that can at the moment be played only via the sequencer I'm having on my wooden rack. And now all I have to do is get the right things going so that you can hear an example of this simple first setup, and I hope that it works. Let's just hit play and hear. And of course give him some voltage. So what you're hearing now is a very simple setup of one voice, one oscillator going into a Trautonium filter. It's a German style filter from the 1930s, and you can basically get a very rich sound because it's 4 low pass or band pass filters in parallel. And as I said, that is the simple setup that I'm using. But enough of this, because what I want to show you is actually the focus of the main setup. And also welcome Graceful Bart, good to see you. Enjoy being Synth one of the many names of our Star Trek's friends from Berlin. Welcome. The main point is that with the modules you can have every kind of combination and patch it endlessly, basically, so that you really have to focus not to start too big, I would say, because I think it was Sid Heresy that once said that you basically should start with a small setup and really try to explore every sound you can create out of this setup, because even just 3 or 4 modules can offer worlds of sound that really take a lot of time to explore and get into, and also to understand all the details of each module, because we're in analog worlds here. It's dependent on temperature, on humidity, so you will have to face that you will have to retune your oscillators basically every time you start up your setup. That's the sound check procedure I'm going through with every start, even though that the conditions are similar each day in this basement room here. But still, the tuning has to happen before you start playing with the modules. Coming to the mobile rack, the one in this case here, it's basically a suitcase for gigs and jams outside of the studio, of course. And it's a 4 or 5 voice setup or rack, depending on how you patch it. It's in a 4 voice setting now, and I used the Arturia Keystep Pro, which can send 4 separate voices, and that's why it's a 4 voice at the moment. And the first one is basically not a real module, I would say, but it's the Behringer Model D. It's a Minimoog clone, also in Eurorack format. The black one you can see here in the bottom row, and it basically has the vintage sound that I think all of you know. Nothing too spectacular there, except that the sounds are very versatile, and you have 3 oscillators in this little synth, and like I said, you have a lot of possibilities right with this one, but it's basically the bread and butter synth, I would say, because you simply get the sounds you need very quickly. You have a wide range of waveforms that you can use, different kinds of squares and ramps, triangle, and even shark tooth in one oscillator, I think. Yeah, or 2 shark tooth also. The second voice is basically the most complex and the one which uses most of the modules. It's triggered by the Behringer 112 oscillator from the Roland System 100 clone series. 2 oscillators in one module, with the same options for both oscillators, basically just 2 in 1. Very cheap to get started with modules. It then goes separate ways, because the next modules are 2 I'm using by Döpfer, the Wave Multiplier 1 and Wave Multiplier 2. Despite the name, the possibilities and functions are a bit different with these 2 modules. If you type in chat !rec, there's a link to Modular Grid, where you can look at all my recs in detail and check out all the modules I'm using there. I mean, you can do this after our long stream session today. Yeah, your opponent, Rec, R-A-C-K, excusing my German pronunciation, but I think it's even in the title of the stream. Anyway, the wave multiplier, or the wave multipliers, the 2 modules, do a lot of stuff with the initial signal and start to add a very strong flavor, I would say, to the wave. Because basically we have the simple waveforms. The 112 module has an output of 3 waveforms. It's triangle, square, and ramp, or sawtooth, depending on how you look at it. And it's simple, but it's effective for the things that you want to do. But the wave multiplier is shaping the waveform. And it works best with sine waves and triangle waves, so that the basic triangle shape, I mean, I have to check my monitor like this. I mean, you know how a triangle looks like. There are some different settings that you can apply so that the waveform gets more and more complex. But enough of the talking, just listen to what it sounds like. And you can hear that over time things are going on with this kind of sound wave or waveform, because what I did and what I find most interesting is that you can control basically every setting on these wave multipliers via CV. So you could apply an envelope, or what I'm doing, you can apply LFOs, and I think I have 12 LFOs in this rack alone, so that basically triangle waves, like here in this small quad LFO by Döpfer, those triangle waves control the CV inputs of the wave multipliers, and that way, especially when you have a drone, there is a long and very deeply evolving sound, and very nice as I would think, because you can't get this out of waveform modulation alone. It is a bit difficult to achieve in this detail, but just check it out for maybe a few seconds. and you saw that I tweaked the LFO speed a bit and made it a bit faster so that you can hear what's happening without having to spend endless minutes. But the thing is, as I said, this is a two-voice setup basically, with the 112 having two oscillators, two separate ones of course. And what I did is that I chose each wave multiplier to have a different filter, so that if I turn down the second voice of this one, you basically hear the wave multiplier 1 going into the wasp filter, the module that comes with the male, as Sid said in a stream some weeks ago, because it's a dubfer module that's very popular and so many people are using it. And thanks for following Cripe and Chesscrack. You hear that I'm also controlling the wasp filter via LFO, so that especially when I set it to drone, that the sound develops over time instead of being very the same all the time basically. The further path is rather simple, because the wasp then goes into a VCA controlled by an envelope that also controls the filter, and then it goes into the mixer. The second voice, when I turn down the wasp and turn up the second voice, here the Trautonium filter, or formant filter as it's called, is in it as well, because back then I got two filters of this kind, because the guy I bought the stuff from had a stereo modular rack, and I decided that I could use it in a better way, just for a monopath like this. And this one has the wave multiplier 2 going into the filter. The only downside of these Trautonium formant filters is that you can't control the values via CV. You just have to set them manually. I mean, it sounds like this. And the interesting part is that you can, as I said, use bandpass filters or low-pass filters, and 4 in parallel, which, especially when you use the bandpass filters, creates a very broad sound, I think. Of course, you could take other filters and put them in parallel as well, but with the formant filter, the Trautonium filter, you have it all in one module in a very small space, I would say. It's, I think, 20 units or so, and still get a very rich sound. And here it's the same. It goes to the amplifier and then it goes into the mixer. But what I do is I like to combine them, because the wasp filter and the Trautonium filter add a very nice sound together. Of course, I'm using delay and reverb as effects for the mixer. As a dry sound would be, yeah, I mean, it works in certain genres, but it's a bit harsh, I think. And especially the reverb adds the softness and also broadens the sound when you deal with mono signals. Because per se, you don't get decent stereo signals out of this. I mean, you could just send the mono signals or two oscillators on each side, left and right channel, but that doesn't really sound that good. As you have heard, the bass sounds can be strong, the high-pitched sounds can be a bit pad-like, but it's just a versatility, I hope that's a correct word now, that makes this kind of rather simple setup so interesting, at least to me. The other modules I'm using are basically very simple modules as well, and it's the A111 series of Döpfer, mini synthesizer voices as they call them. The first one that you're hearing now is the number 5, the A1115 mini synthesizer voice, a very German name in English for such a module, better known as the Dark Energy that Döpfer released, I think, 15 years ago or so. And they had a reissue as a module, and that's the one that you're hearing. And thanks for the raid, Mr. McGoo. Welcome, raiders. And I hope your stream was great. We're talking about modules today. The Dark Energy, as I like to call it, has a classic 24 dB filter, like the Moog one, as far as I know. But I think it just does its job very well, because you can have very nice bass sounds going on, or like these mid-range sounds that make sequences interesting as well. Also, back then when the Dark Energy was released, it was one of the first, well, modular pieces, I would say, that interested me a lot, and so I thought, why not go back to this initial idea and actually get this Dark Energy. And if you want to start with modular synthesis, it's a great way to do so, because it's also not the most the big module. It's a rather small module. As you see, it is 24 units in this rack size, and I think it's a great way to start, because you have a lot of stuff in there that you can use. It's a complete voice with VCO, VCF, basically oscillator, filter, amplifier, envelope generator, the ADSR, and 2 LFOs, which is kind of rare in a complete synth voice, because they actually don't feature LFOs most of the time. A stripped down version of this module is the 4th voice I'm using. It's the A1116, which doesn't have a name, but which basically just has an oscillator, a filter section, the VCA, the amplifier, and the envelope in a simple way. You can have ADSR, but you only have knobs for attack and decay and release. Sustain is not controllable here, and it sounds like this. although the modules are similar, you can hear differences between them because the 6, as I like to know it, not like the 5, the dark energy, but it's number 6. It has a function that's simply called balance in this synth. And as far as I understand it, you have some kind of mix between a sub-oscillator and the main oscillator going on. I like to have it controlled via CV with a very slow LFO, so that over time, when I'm using it as a drone, or when I'm using it for sequences, you have this change from a mid-range oscillator sound to this very low bass sound, which just adds to the soundscapes. And well, a sequence on this synth sounds like this. And yeah, it's a very nice bass voice that you can use for yeah, I mean, for many stuff actually. But the interesting part is it's a small module as well. I think 8 units, and it adds so much to every rack that you have or every setup that you have, because you have a very strong bass sound or a potential very good high-pitched sound, depending on how you set it, in your rack. And I think I was a bit suspicious at first, because I thought, okay, it's just a dark energy in a stripped down version, but it's not like that. It has a very own character, and the filter is a bit more aggressive. I'm not sure if it's the same as in the dark energy, but the resonance, if you turn it up high, it will blow out your ears. So be careful with this. Also, the signal is very hot that comes out of it, much hotter than on the dark energy. And by hot, I mean louder, basically. I have an attenuator going on so that I can turn it down a bit, because it doesn't have a volume control. Because basically that's what you do in a mixer module, like a small one you can see here, a mono mixer for 4 inputs. And that's basically the rack I'm using. It's a mobile rack. I will use it possibly next month, when we are going to have a live jam, somehow triggered by the Golden Shrimp Guild, happening in Cologne. But we will see how this goes. It will be our first jam together. I'm not sure if we're going to stream this, but if so, you will probably see it on my channel as well. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm having to look now, because my fancy mini iPad, of course, has small font, but I mean, you can post any questions in the chat or in Discord, and then I'll answer them later. And this is basically the mobile setup. 4 voices or 5 voices depending on how you set it. Like I said, you can separate the two 112 voices with the wave multipliers to separate voices, but as the key step only has 4 outputs, I like to keep it simple and have 4 voices to control. That being said, why not have a short jam based simply on those 4 voices? I hope that the tuning is alright. I had to retune the Model D before starting the stream. Let's just see how this goes. Of course, the sequences are pre-programmed, and I do have 50 minutes left, so let's go. This is modular synthesis. Just by having some notes going on in the sequencers and having a few modules, because actually this is a small rack, so to speak. And this is basically the way music or electronic music works since the late 60s. I think my time is almost up. We're going to raid back to the Golden Shrimp Guild channel now, and then Actitect will tell you what's up next. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for checking out my rack as well. As I said, check out Modular Grid. My links are with the exclamation mark rack and also exclamation mark setup. And we are going to raid back to the Golden Shrimp Guild channel now, so that Actitect can tell you all about the further program of the modular edition of GSG Live. Work as Messiah, thank you so much. Clockbash, thank you. Redlocks, thank you as well. Your opponent, nice to have you here. Also, thanks for the follows. We are ready to go. And, well, let's just raid back to the Golden Shrimp Guild channel. Take care, enjoy the set, the upcoming streams and the interviews. And, see you soon. Take care.